Okay. So, Jason, your company is the leader in fantasy sports. You've made a big push in advertising, and you recently called off a fairly high-profile merger with your biggest rival, FanDuel. So I just want to talk a little bit about the new news that just went out a few minutes ago. You're going to start live streaming EuroLeague basketball sports. Just tell us a little bit about what that news is and what that means for your model and for your business.
Sure. So we just, I think, literally right now, are announcing our deal with EuroLeague, and we're very excited about it. It's our first deal that will involve streaming, so it's a new area for us. We've done deals before where we've done referrals to streaming sites, but we've never actually integrated directly with our platform. And I think that beyond the great results I expect to drive for EuroLeague, it's also just a really important step for us in our mission to create the most compelling sports experience possible for people. I think that the consumer of the future, really of today, but especially in the future, they're going to want everything integrated. They don't want to have to click around a bunch of different places, enter their information in multiple times. Everything's going to need to be mobile driven. All of those are the trends we're seeing. And I think if you create a superior consumer experience by making it easy for people to do what they want to do, and people playing fantasy want to watch the games, you're going to see more stickiness on both products.
Excellent. So what are your ultimate ambitions for this? I mean, you're starting with EuroLeague basketball, serving the US and Canadian market. Where might you go from there with this model?
So I think for us, and this is really why EuroLeague was an ideal partner, is they're up for trying new things. For us, this is a proof of concept as much as anything else. I think the goal is to make it successful, just like any partnership. But I think if it is successful, this one has real opportunity, not just with other sports leagues, but with rights holders who have their own OTT networks and other sorts of streaming that are looking to drive subscribers and make those subscribers more sticky. If we can prove that by doing this, we can take an audience in the US that's playing NBA or other sports and introduce them to EuroLeague, get them to watch the games, get them engaged with the sport. I think that that's a really powerful case study for taking it to other leagues and broadcast partners.
Okay, so that's the news. Let's just talk a little bit about the concept of the business. So someone I know and respect very much who looks at your business says that, to be honest, your industry is a small one. It's not growing as much as one might expect, and you're losing money. Can you just contextualize a little bit the true and or falseness of that?
I want to know who said that you respect. So, I can't speak for everyone in the industry, but we're growing. And I think that if you look at the audience of fantasy sports players, which has been reported to be north of 50 million in the US and Canada, we have less than 10 million users right now. Only 3.5 million have ever played anything for money with us. So you still have 90+% of the players that are playing traditional fantasy sports that have yet to even try our product. And I think that that's a pretty large market. But then when you factor in international, there's about 10 million people playing fantasy soccer, fantasy football in the UK, another 4 or 5 million playing in Germany, on and on. I think that there's 100 million plus just between US and Europe. If you factor in Asia, Australia, everywhere else, you're getting into the several hundred million. And there's over 3 billion sports fans in the world. So we think that's a pretty big market to go after. And obviously, like any company, we have to continue to evolve our products, continue to make the customer experience better, and to continue to stay on top of technology and make sure that we're incorporating the latest trends into what we do. But that's what we're built to do. So, and then I think, what were your other questions?
No, I want to come back and talk a little bit about the difference between Europe and the US, because while there's a lot of space out there, the regulation is different out there. So we can talk about why that might not necessarily get you to where you want to be profit-wise, but just so I can close out the discussion on your business model. Now, you've been saying that you can reach profit if you want to. I presume that the amount of investment you need to do to get to where you want to be isn't quite there for you to become profitable. Question is, by what timeline will you turn profitable?
Yeah, I mean, I think that any company should look at investments they're making based on their ROI, and whatever their hurdle rate is should be the hurdle rate for those investments. So right now, we're able to, and we're fortunate to be in this case, in this situation, we're able to make investments that meet a pretty high hurdle that we have for payback. And those investments are driving growth of the business. And I think that at this point, that's really what the key factor behind the decision is, less so than any prescribed timeline or where we want to get to. That said, if I had to guess now, I would say overall the business will be profitable in late 2019, although I expect that the fantasy sports portion of the business might actually get profitable sooner.
Okay, so how much sooner? Sorry, just to finish that thought. How much sooner?
I think sometime within the year before that, but it really all depends on how much we want to continue investing in it and what other opportunities like streaming we focus on. But we see a lot of growth elsewhere, so I think that we're going to continue to want to make investments in those places. And if that means that even beyond 2019, the right decision is to continue to not make a profit, we'll do that.
Okay, so you made a big investment last year. I think you've raised something like $750 million to date. What might one infer about your worth and value based on what we know now?
So we're private. We don't disclose the value of the company. There's certainly been some speculation out there, though, and most of the numbers reported aren't too far off.
Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about the elephant that was in the room, which was your possible deal with your biggest rival. Now that was called off because of concerns from the FTC and regulators. What might it take to bring that back? Under which conditions could you envisage bringing that back?
I never say never anything, but I think it would take a lot. Right now, we feel pretty good about our position as an independent company. Also, everybody's kind of mentally moved on. So to get everyone excited and gain momentum, both with shareholders, but also with the employees of the company around doing that again, it would take a real big change, I think. Some reason to go back and say, this is why we think it'll reach a different outcome this time, and why it's still worth, because a lot of people, even towards the end of the process this time, felt like it really wasn't the best thing for us. I thought it was, but there were plenty of people who didn't. So I think also there's going to be a lot of people saying, well, why is it worth going through that again? Mm-hmm. Last time we went through that whole process and ended up getting a no after investing over a year and a half in negotiating the deal and going through the FTC process.
Right, okay, but it's fair to say that you've eclipsed FanDuel.
Yeah, we're substantially larger than them now.
Okay, so you're about 60% market share for the industry you're in. I mean, how are you estimating growing that in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, 60% is already a lot, so I think that's why we believe that a lot of our growth is going to have to come from new innovation and new investments that we're making. That includes both bringing more new customers onto the existing platform and existing product, but also launching new products and finding new ways to both distribute our core, but also new revenue streams that we can expand into. And I think for us, the real kind of secret sauce we feel we have is our customer. We have millions of them. We have all of their data, their payment info saved, so it's very easy for us to cross-sell them into different products. We have tremendous amount of data and information about what their purchasing habits are, and most importantly, in the world of sports, what they're interested in, which games, which teams, which sports. And we also have a very highly engaged player. Outside of Facebook, there's no public company with higher minutes on site or minutes in app than DraftKings that we've been aware of. Tremendous amount of time that our customers spend with us on at least a weekly and often on a daily basis. So you can do a lot with that, and I think that there's a lot of places that we'll be able to grow and a lot of companies and partners that we can work with.
So, I mean, one area you are cooperating in with FanDuel is getting, fantasy legalized in all 50 states. You're going state by state. Can you just tell us a little bit about what you've spent on that and how you split that up?
So that was actually where we really started working together, and one of the things that led to merger discussions. In 2015, towards the beginning of the year, we decided that we thought that the industry was going to move towards regulation. We were already seeing bills getting introduced in states around the country to regulate. So we knew it was only a matter of time, especially as we grew, before that really started to speed up. Didn't expect it to happen as quickly as it did, but we knew it was going to happen. So we decided to collaborate together, and it's been an incredibly successful partnership. We've ended up passing, in the last 2 years alone, 16 bills, 18 total now. And I think that that's a pretty remarkable run in state legislatures. Not many industries have seen that rapid adoption of regulation and embracing new technologies the way that we have. I think we took a bit of a different approach than some of the tech companies that have been written about in this space have. We were very collaborative with regulators. We resisted being antagonistic, even when we disagree with some of the approaches that they were taking, and I think it paid off.
So when are you forecasting getting to all 50 states? And more importantly, what changes for your business and your model when you do?
I don't know that we ever will get to all 50. We only operate in 41 today, so there might be some that ultimately decide that this isn't something that they want their citizens of their state to be able to do. But I think we'll get to a very high percentage of them. And, at the end of the day, we don't need these laws anymore, even though we had some regulatory attention. And I think at a time, a year and a half ago, it was important. Now it really has subsided. And all the laws that have been passed classify fantasy as a skill game, which puts us on the right side of the law in any other states. There's now a lot of precedent built up that some of the challenges that this wasn't skill-based aren't true, according to the 18 legislatures that have now passed bills, and not one has passed one classifying it as chance-based. So, I think it's a good thing for the industry to see regulation, and we're going to continue to support those efforts in states because, like it or not, those discussions are happening with or without us, so we might as well be part of the process. But I don't think that we feel like we need it to necessarily do anything for the business.
Okay, so since we're in Europe and we're talking about overseas expansion, you did this deal with EuroLeague basketball. Just recap for us a little bit about where you are overseas and where you want to be overseas that we don't know about today.
So today we are in US, Canada, and then 5 other countries, all in Europe. UK is the one that's been the most developed. It's still really new, though. We only launched it in 2016, so just last year. We, a few months ago, launched Ireland, Austria, and Netherlands. And about 6 months ago, we launched Germany. So those are really new. We haven't invested a tremendous amount in marketing outside of the UK, where we've also only invested a small amount so far. We view this first phase as getting the products ready for that, making sure that things that, for example, on the German website, translating and things like that are done before we start spending money on marketing, because probably give us a little bit better return. So we're still kind of in the phase of localizing and getting everything ready. But in the UK, at least, we're starting to get to a point where it makes sense to start doing some marketing, and we'll see how it goes. So far, just on the strength of word of mouth and PR and very limited marketing, so far we've already gotten thousands of players across these jurisdictions. So I think that it'll be really well received once we actually turn on the marketing spigot.
Which brings me to my question on regulation of earlier and scale and, more importantly, profits. Because you're operating in a region in Europe where the regulation is more lax than in the US. So the question is, what does success look like for you in a market where there's already it's very fragmented, basically?
Yeah, I think that that's an opportunity because there's a large audience of customers that are already familiar with these types of products, that are very comfortable, that they're legal, that they're regulated, or at least they're okay. And I think that increases conversion and adoption. Over the long term, definitely makes the wallet share battle tougher. And you mentioned it's a fragmented market. It's a very competitive market. But in the short term, I think there's a really fruitful pool of players to draw from that are already familiar enough with the type of product that we offer that with some basic education, we should be able to get to try us out.
Will you stay with the Europe sort of in terms of your ambitions in this region, or can we look to other regions like Asia or LATAM, or what are you thinking about longer term if you're thinking big?
So outside of Europe, the biggest opportunity we're looking at now is Australia, and I expect that we will launch something there in the next 6 to 12 months, hopefully sooner. We've begun looking at Asia a little bit, as well as Latin America. We're still at the very early stages of research there, so I can't really definitively say we have any real plans at this point, but we're obviously aware that they're huge markets with tremendous potential. Sports are great because everywhere in the world people like sports, and these types of games in one form or another, they're called different things in different countries, but they all have them.
Right.
So I don't see any reason why this can't be popular anywhere in the world that has sports fans, which pretty much is every single country in the world.
So possibly, quite possibly Australia, maybe Asia, but we're too early to say.
Yeah, I would say at some point, but not in the immediate term plans. But that could change quickly if opportunities emerge. And right now, it's more just lack of understanding the markets than anything of why we're not moving more quickly and aggressively.
I have more business questions, but I just want to pull back a little bit. And on the way over, you talked just about the genesis of the concept of your company, of DraftKings. Could you just recap for the audience briefly, like, how did this come to you and when?
So I have been a fantasy sports player for pretty much my whole life. I loved it, and I felt like I understood the product well. Never really, thought of this idea before, and wasn't even aware that it existed when it was first brought to me. I had wanted to be an entrepreneur for many years. I had started really getting into it when I first joined college, and that was in the late 90s when the tech boom was happening, and I just fell in love with the idea of all these young entrepreneurs raising tons of money and building these great tech giants, and I just thought that was what was my destiny. I wanted to do that. Almost dropped out of school, happy I didn't, because a few years later the bubble burst, and much to my dad's happiness, who said I should go get a real job, he called it. He was very happy I decided to go work in corporate for a while, which I did for almost a decade. And it was very lucky because beyond learning, I met my two eventual co-founders who, around the time where the idea came about, I had just been having these discussions separately with each of them about how this is the time, I really want to go do something, I just had the bug, I wanted to. Problem was I had no idea. So that's a bit of a missing piece. One day my co-founder, Matt, pulled me aside, and he knew we were all fantasy fans because we had played in the Office League at Vistaprint together, which is the company I worked at. So everybody knew we were into fantasy. And Matt knew that because he had known me for years. He was at Capital One. We played in different fantasy leagues together, so he knew I was a nut over it. So he came up to me and he said, hey, I got this idea. And he told me the basic concept for DraftKings, and I feel like pretty much right away I knew that was the one. It was just, I was the market, I was the customer, so I felt like I just right away understood it. And first thing was like, am I overestimating this? Because you can do that when you're the customer, think everybody's like you, and just because it appeals to you doesn't mean it will appeal to others. But we went back and did some research and found, tens of millions of people at the time playing fantasy sports, all the other things. Found some other companies were actually doing this already, so that was a little bit dismaying at first. Oh no, but when you have that, I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs about that, when you have that first moment where you realize what you want to do isn't original, and everybody kind of has that, but then when you really think about it, it's actually way better, because you don't want to be going and trying to create a market alone. You don't want to be trying to figure everything else out so some fast follower can do it the way that you wish you had done it when you knew everything you know now. It's actually helpful to see that there were others out there, see what they were doing, see what was working, see what wasn't. And we felt like we could do it better. We came from a data, tech, and analytics background. That was our thing, tech and analytics. We just thought tech and analytics is going to win this. And we knew that we had a really, really good pedigree there, and we could bring on other people that were really strong in that area.
Well, one quick follow. What can we learn? It's a good question, I think, for entrepreneurs, but what can we learn from failure? What have you learned from failure?
No path is straight. Everybody, when they glamorize the story and leave out the failures, it's just not how it works. Every great learning experience usually comes from a failure of some kind. Oscar Wilde had a great quote that I love. He said, experience is the word we give to our mistakes. It's what we call our mistakes. And I thought that was really interesting. I was like, what is experience? Experience is failures, mistakes. That's when you get experience. When you're doing well, you don't tend to self-reflect as much. You don't feel like you have to make adjustments. Anyone who can respond well to those things, they're going to keep getting better. And people who don't, who ignore the failures and don't take lessons away from them, they're destined to keep doing the same thing they've been doing, which I don't think that's any way to run a company or really any way to approach life.
I mean, and on the flip side, what does success look like for you? You kind of outlined your short-term vision. What about the longer term?
I've always tried to paint a vision, but as far as defining success, not to do that. What I mean specifically by that is success can take different forms, and a lot of what will ultimately make me judge whether I thought this was a successful venture or not, a lot of those things are based on factors that have yet to even emerge. If you had asked me 5.5 years ago when I started this, I would have told you success was selling the company for $40 million in a couple of years. And I think at the time that would have been a very genuine answer that I would have given you. Now, totally different, right? And it's going to change again. It's sort of like I had been asked earlier, who do I admire? And I said one of the people I admire is Jeff Bezos. I can't speak for him, but I would imagine when he was selling books, he had no idea that he one day was going to be selling cloud infrastructure to startups that were trying to launch websites. That totally came out by accident. And I think that a lot of great success stories, where they ended up, anyone who's telling the honest truth will tell you, I never knew it was going to go here. And part of being a great entrepreneur is just seeing that, seeing the world as it develops, seeing how things you're doing are working and not doing, and iterating. All the great companies iterate, all the great companies add. They never are doing the same thing for very long. And that's what's exciting about it. And I think if we're successful at doing that, whatever the actual outcome is, I will deem a success.
So you said 40 million was what you defined success at a few years ago.
Yeah.
So today you can't say a
lot
couple billion.
More. I think anything outside of a multi-billion-dollar exit would be very disappointing to my shareholders. Mm-hmm. For me, I don't even really want that. I love what I'm doing, and I think that this is a company that's on the right side of where technology and media is going. So I would like to be doing this for a long time, and I think that opportunities for us to grow and expand will continue to emerge. When you're seeing trends with media and cord cutting and gaming and all those sorts of things that are, if you forecast forward, very, very likely to improve your addressable market, and very, very likely to be well set up for a company with tech DNA that's mobile first, that's technology first. Hard to imagine that riding this thing out for a while isn't the right thing to do.
Okay, so we have time for about one more question, and I guess I want to wrap up with the scenario. Okay, let's say it's 2023. Sports gambling is legalized across the U.S. I log on to my DraftKings.com, login, and I want to place a bet on the outcome of that night's NFL games. Will I be able to do that?
That's a great question. The answer is I don't know. I think that we're still figuring out what our product roadmap would look like in a world, or I should say in the US, if there is a change that opens up a lot of new markets. I think a lot of the games that people play in offices, like brackets and survivor pools, which people don't traditionally think of when they think of sports betting, are very interesting markets as well. Mm-hmm. So, I think if there's widespread legalization of new activities that people want to do, we have to figure out how to get those experiences to our customers, whether that's through partnership, developing ourselves. How that would look is very hard to say. We're still working on that.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Jason. Thanks for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.